All right, time for Oppo research. I feel like my political science degree just popped back into my head, Ted. And it's just like, opposition research, one of those political movies, like All the President's Men or something. First question for you. What were some of your larger takeaways out of the 2025 season heading into 26 here with San Jose?
So 2025 represented an interesting juxtaposition of various realities because that team doesn't really exist anymore. And that's the hardest thing to really compare to this year, is because you had a great offense, one of the best in the league. You had Christian Espinosa, you had Chicho Arango, you had Joseph Martinez, and now those three players are no longer with the team. And so you thought going into the offseason that, okay, this is an offensive heavy team that needs to improve its defense. But then the dynamic totally changed. So it's hard to really tell you a lot about what 2025 meant as it pertains to 2026. That said, it did usher in Bruce Arena taking over the team, the most celebrated coach in the history of American soccer. He has a vision. I think it obviously changed the way the offseason went, but I think that we learned he was willing to play the young players. We saw Reed Roberts get some time last year. He started at center back last week. That was a big moment. Bo LaRue, young player, played, I think, in 29 matches last year. And, he had a start Saturday, So I think we learned a lot about what Bruce Arena is willing to do with the young players, but it's still kind of a work in progress because the big story last year was the Earthquakes attack. And the three players that were the big part of that attack are now gone.
12 exits, 6 entries. And I guess with the fan base, I'll ask it this way. How much of a shell shock was it with the egress and the lack of ingress until somebody walked through gate C last night about 9:00 local time?
I think that Bruce Arena was not just in a hurry to get signings for the sake of making signings. I think that he liked a lot of what he had in terms of the young players within the Earthquakes and the Quakes 2 system. And I think that he was willing to rely on a lot of those young players to take a big step forward from year 1 to year 2. I referenced a player like Reed Roberts. There's also Max Floriani. We can talk about Daniel Muni. He's going from year 3 to year 4. So I think that knowing his background and the ability to develop young players, especially on the defensive side, was that something that Bruce Arena was going for. I think there's no, greater point to that than looking at Dave Ramey, who back in 2015, when Arena was the head coach of the Galaxy, he was in his first year out of USF, and he was the first player to make it from Los Dos up to the first team. And, Dave Romney has now been a long-time stalwart center back in Major League Soccer, and he can play out wide as well as a fullback if need be. But I think it spoke to what Bruce Arena was willing to do. Now, you referenced the arrival of Timo Werner coming in from Germany and arriving yesterday at SFO. That was a big signing, and I think they knew even before they didn't know, that they were going to lose certain players, especially Chicho Arango, who signed a new deal with the Quakes and then decided for personal and family reasons that they wanted to, to make a change. I think that they had identified a player with an international pedigree and was somebody that they felt could really kind of transform the attack. And I still think that is there as well, even if some of the pieces that they thought were going to be there aren't there, specifically Chicho Arango. But this is a player who has a very, very high level of experience. He's won all over Europe. He has played with some of the best players in the world. And so right now I'm really curious to see what he does, especially an Earthquakes team that looked pretty decent offensively in week number 1 and already looked very, very fast. You add Turbo Timo to the mix, and I don't know if he's going to play this week or even be on the roster. That's yet to be determined. But when he is a part of it, I think it just adds another very dynamic aspect of the Quakes attack.
When you look at, I'm gonna steal that, by the way, Turbo Timo. I'm gonna steal.
It's not mine. It's from Europe, by the way. So I'm stealing it as well.
So then I'm stealing it from you, and you've gotten it from Europe. Yes, proper hydration when it comes to safe guesting. We believe that here as well. So is this, trying to draw a parallel? Is this almost like it? And I'd like to know how this came to pass with Timo Werner coming to San Jose, because that's not necessarily, you'd sit there and you make an instant line and go
right
one to the other. It almost seems like a Thomas Mueller to Vancouver kind of a thing, where you're not under the hot spotlight of the major media market. You're
Mhm.
kind of off to the side a little bit. You can kind of do your thing. Am I off there when it comes to how this connection was made?
I mean, I don't know if the comparison is the same. Not that you're wrong or off per se. I just know that Timo had not been performing up to where he had been previously. I know there had been some injuries along the way and he'd kind of fallen out of form. So it's just a matter of Timo having this opportunity, and maybe he felt that going to a place like the Bay Area, like similar to a place like Atlanta, which is a hotbed of a media market, to where that maybe he's not in as bright a light situation, but he can restart his career and be kind of a focal point to be allowed that opportunity to restart their career. And I don't even know if restart the career is the same way. It just maybe reset is a better way of looking at it. But no one knew going into the end of the last year that Timo was on the Quakes, overall landscape or on the horizon of what they were looking at in terms of players to bring in. I think Bruce Arena knew that he wanted to make big acquisitions to try and change the culture in San Jose. And that's something that he's spoken of, at various moments. So when that name popped up, I believe it was Tom Bogert, who first broke the story about the Quakes talking to Timo, was kind of like, oh, all right, well, this is a big move. And I think that, not to be cynical, God knows broadcasters were never cynical, but
what?
It is
Never.
crazy talk. But it is a World Cup year. There is an international flair. There are going to be new fans who are going to be paying attention to national teams. And if you bring in a guy who has an association with national teams, who comes from Europe, who's played in these big games and big tournaments, fans in San Jose might be able to say, hey, Timo, he's been a big part of that German national team. He's played for big European clubs. I'm now interested in this. The Quakes have a big name, and that helps draw people into the club. And it may not have been that linear, but it doesn't hurt certainly for them to have a player of that pedigree now as a reason for fans who might be drawn in by the World Cup to want to go and see, the San Jose Earthquakes play, whether or not Timo is on the, current German national team. I just think that established names, as much as MLS still wants to be a league that is, developing their own talent and selling to Europe and bringing in South American talent, no greater example than what we saw initially with Almiron with Atlanta. This is a way to do it. Established stars from Europe still draw fans in the United States and North America. And I don't like when people go with the, retirement league and all that stuff. And it's like, well, I watched a lot of players like Messi who can still perform at an extremely high level at the international, the top leagues in the world, play in Major League Soccer, and it didn't look like they were close to retirement at all. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, guess what? He went back to Europe, and before the injuries, still played at an extremely high level. And I could go on, and I don't need to inform you of this, but I think that fans, by proximity, when those big European names come over, they want to go see them.
So is there a rational expectation in addition to an irrational expectation for output for Werner when he shows up this season?
I don't really know how to answer that because I don't know what his game looks like in Major League Soccer as of yet.
Yeah.
That said, I do believe when I look at some of the other German players that have come over, it feels like there is a relatively easy transition that happens with some of the German guys. You look at, Mueller in Vancouver is no greater example, but I just kind of feel like those guys come in ready to go. And that might be part of the German culture where they're very timely, they're on schedule, and they don't come over and, have, the belly to get rid of and get back in shape. I expect Timo to come over and be able to hit the ground running. But if I were to be optimistic, I would love for him to be a double-digit goal type scoring guy and provide more, just of that speed dynamic for San Jose. I heard, some people talking about that at certain stages of his time in Europe that he started to have the yips and couldn't put the ball on frame. I have no idea about, things like that. I don't think something like shooting at net versus like what we would think of a shortstop going to first. I think those are two widely different versions of the quote unquote, the yips. So I'll have to see, but if I don't even know if it's, wildly overreaching or, pretty baseline to think that he's the type of guy who could score double-digit goals in Major League Soccer. And if he does that, I think that's only going to improve every other aspect of the Quakes offense because he would provide something to worry about. And that would allow, more opportunities for other guys out there on the pitch for San Jose.
Golden tones of Ted Ramey hanging out with us for opposition research. I never thought in my brain, but of course, me thinking about my brain, I would have Timo Werner, Bart, and Steve Sachs all in the same triangle as you were discussing what's going on in 2025 with Timo Werner. Last week, I did not have, by the way, and I don't know if anybody did, and if they did, more power to them. If they had Daniel Muni and a brace, look, if somebody had triple captained Muni and had him, on their fantasy team, A, I want to know who you are. B, I want to draft off of you in a NASCAR sense to figure out what your picks are going to be like. What was it like to see the match unfold the way that it did for you against Sporting Kansas City last week?
Last year, up to the point where Daniel Muni scored his first 2 goals, there had been various moments in his career where he'd had headers just either be saved, pushed over the bar by the goalie, or, just had moments where he was there and putting good shots on frame. So the second one, the header, was, that was a fun moment. The first one, that's a poacher's special. But Daniel Muni, since the minute he came to San Jose, I have felt like he is a quote-unquote star in the making, and I would not be surprised if in the future he does get the opportunity with the national team, because he is deceptively fast. I think people are now starting to recognize him more of the athlete that he is. I've talked to the guys about, they've watched him go golf, and they're just kind of mortified by how natural his swing is. He's a natural athlete, and he's a sports nut, by the way. Like, he wants to talk about the Blues. He wants to talk about the Cardinals. You go down the list, he wants to talk about every sport. He's an Indiana Hoosier, loves college football and college basketball. I was texting with him during the college national championship game this year, but he is a guy who, now that he's lost a little bit of the baby fat from his face, because he was, drafted as a kid out of Indiana, the difference between him then and now, engaged, he's, and I don't say this to be cute, but he was, a kid coming out of college, and now he's a man. He's added some muscle. He's always been fast, but I would say now he's probably in the category of one of, if not the fastest center back in the league. And he's got a voice that the first time I interviewed him, I got ticked off because I was like, your voice is deeper and better than mine. I was like, come on, man. Like, you're already a professional athlete. You really have to just put me down here in our first ever interview? But he has star qualities. And I am not going to be surprised if he is one of the breakout players. Like, I don't know if he's going to become Walker Zimmerman or something to that extent, but I would not be surprised if we saw a rapid ascent from him, because he has the athletic ability. He has kind of that eye for the moments. And I think that last year people can say, oh, the Earthquakes offense was Earthquakes defense was leaky. And yeah, they gave up over 60 goals. You're going to get that label put upon you. But I don't think it was specifically because of Daniel Muni. I think it was because the Quakes got caught out in a stretched out defense in transition and got put in a lot of one-on-one emergency defending situations, which led to them conceding goals. But, Muni has a star ability about him. And while I don't expect, a lot of braces from him, I'm not going to be surprised if we see more goals, and I'm not going to be surprised if we see more team of the match day appointments from him as we get deeper into this season and his career.
So then I guess now, once again, equivalence coming into the conversation. So Muni is, for the week anyway, a quarterback from Indiana University, and that makes Bruce Arena Kurt Signetti.
Yes. That's a good pull. And, we wait for more of these storylines and comparisons to create themselves, because they are fun, at least for guys like us.
Yep. So injuries leaning into the Atlanta match. What's the report card from the hospital ward coming into this matchup this weekend?
Last week, what we knew was that Edwin Mendoza, young midfielder, and Earl Edwards Jr. were dealing with lower body injuries. Haven't had the big update as of yet. If there was a big injury, I have a feeling at this point somebody would have whispered in my ear. I have not had anything like that, so you can feel like everyone's ready to go. I spoke with Benji Kikanovic yesterday, who was the starting right back for the San Jose Earthquakes on Saturday against Sporting Kansas City. He was stoked and ready to go. He was talking about how fast they are on the wings, with him on the right side. DeJuan Jones this year playing on his natural left. Talked about Jamar Ricketts as the left wing. Useni Buddha. You had Timo into the mix. And there's a lot of pace out there, especially Reed Roberts, Daniel Muni, like I was just talking about. So no one popped a hammy out of week one or anything like that. If that's the answer you were looking for.
Yeah, and it was very, very Stanley Cup playoffs of you to sit, lower body injury. Okay, I get it. We're already in Stanley Cup playoffs mode when we're talking about injuries.
I work for the Sharks too, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's look, man.
That's what it says. I noticed this, I think around 2017, 2018, that the lower body, upper body worked its way into the soccer vernacular. And I was like, really? Are we doing this here now as well? We can't just, because, it's like if you see a guy go shoulder first into the boards, it's like, I'm pretty sure they just separated their shoulder and upper body. It's like, all right, I guess we're playing this game where we can pretend we don't know what the injury is. And now it's snuck into soccer. And, when a guy's running, they grab the back of their leg. 9 times out of 9, that's a hamstring injury.
Yeah. That is a lower body injury. Somebody shoots a dart and it ends up, you see the dart coming out of the back of the hamstring. Yes, that is a lower body injury. I would anticipate as much.
It's very broadly termed.
Yes, and so I'm guessing also that Bruce Arena might have a little bit of something to do with that too. You don't want to give away too much for the opposition coming to town.
True.
With Atlanta, it is a work in progress. They did not get the full exhibition schedule because of Mother Nature, who always remains undefeated in our proceedings. And so you kind of got to see some building blocks against your first opponent, and you got to hang out around for 80 minutes with FC Cincinnati. I'm intrigued with this because of what you can see from Miguel Almiron and Alexei Miranchuk, now apparently healthy, going up against this young defense. I'm intrigued with that matchup, especially on the left-hand side of the defense for San Jose, going up against the attacking right for Atlanta United here.
Yeah, and obviously with Almiron out there, even though he's not the most natural wide player, you have to worry about him coming from the outside in. He's very dangerous. And I will give Atlanta a lot of credit because I think the 2-0 scoreline was not indicative of how that game really played the entire way. I know that Evander goes down with injury and that changes the entire dynamic, but that's 1 of 11. And when did the 2 goals come in? The 72nd and 81st, something like that? Is that?
You're in there.
Yeah. And it's like, I did not see a team, and I know FC Cincinnati's had great success, in pretty much since they got over their rough start in Major League Soccer, and they've been a consistently high-performing team, but I didn't think Atlanta got played off the field or anything like that. The young defender, it's pronounced Baez, correct?
Yes, Elias Baez, yes.
Yeah, I'm looking to see more out of him. I'm really curious to see how he develops. But one of the things that I'm really curious about with the mentality of this team, and it helps that a guy like Almiron is back, but moving on from Brad Guzan is very hard to do, not just as a franchise icon and, obviously a U.S. icon as well. And I've interviewed him before and just, one of the all-time dudes. I've never met anyone who has a negative thing to say about him. But, in terms of organizing the defense, that's something that he knew how to do as well as anyone. The moral backbone, the fact that he came back ahead of schedule from the Achilles injury, all the things that we associate with him. When that leaves a franchise, it's just like the Earthquakes when Wondolowski left. Like that is a change that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight to have that heart and soul of the club. And I'm not, it was difficult when Martinez left the club. I was aware of that, but he was not the same guy after the knee injury. Almiron gets the chance to go over to Europe. No one's going to begrudge him for that. But because Brad had been there for so long and was, just such a pillar of the franchise, I'm just curious to see how the team adapts and changes because there is, nothing quite like that, especially when it's a netminder, like that's a big change for any franchise to make.
You bring in Lucas Hoyos to be there with Jaden Hibbert in the battle of A and B. Jaden Hibbert gets the starts late last year. And so now either way, you have the experienced voice with Lucas Hoyos to help Jaden Hibbert in his growth, or have the other be there for the extended competitions and such, the competitions in the week. So we're looking forward to that. Traditionally, when these two teams meet, it is chaos. And
yes.
You could spell it with a K. I mean, I don't care how you spell chaos. It can go either way. Since this is the 10th season for Atlanta United, it is what we refer to as, we've done a thing at SDH on top 10 moments. And one of the top 10 moments I said when we were doing our season preview was 5 Stripes After Dark with San Jose, where it was one of the most chaotic matches ever. It ends up 4-3. You have a goal that's called back. You go, and all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Are you expecting another round of the Agents of Chaos, or are you hoping calm?
Yeah. I've talked about this at length. If you go back to the first meeting at 2017 at Bobby Dodd Stadium, that was another great performance, which, by the way, I know that that's an outdoor stadium, but that's the loudest environment that I've ever broadcast from. And an old building like that, the sound bounces around differently. Before the game, there was a lightning and thunderstorm, which, for people who are not who haven't been to the East Coast or are Californians like me, and my dad's told me this because he was a broadcaster as well. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, you get to the East Coast, just the afternoon thunder shower, it rolls through, and then, you play your game later. But that first game, of which there were also red cards, was a wild performance. The first meeting at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, there were red cards in that. I think the Earthquakes went down a man early, and then I may have been Martinez who scored late. The late goals in 2023, the Quakes take a 1-0 lead in the season opener late into the game, and I love it. I think that when these two teams meet, I always talk about that game you referenced from 2018 where I say, the game where the Quakes went up 4-1 and then lost 4-3. Yeah, I remember that game. But yeah, it was great fun. But back to that first game in 2017 at Bobby Dodd, I was texting the board up during that pregame, and I was in a panicked mood because like 20 minutes before the game, as you know, not the newest stadium in the world there, Bobby Dodd, my internet the line went down. You notice I'm saying the line, and I couldn't connect. And then the engineering there did mad work underneath there, just kind of, screwing around with wires. They got me back up because I thought we were going to have to go over the phone or something, reconnected, but I had to text the board up. I was like, I cannot hear you over my headset. You're just gonna have to text me when I'm on air. And so that's how it went. And we had to go through that, but great experience at that, at the old building and at the new building. Just a beautiful, beautiful stadium. But it's great chaos with a K, and I'm hoping for more of it just because it is so much fun when these two teams meet.
So if you would please, sir, cut the promo for us for those that want to listen, not just on this moment, but all the other moments when it comes to your calls with the Quakes. Hit me.
So you can go on Apple TV this week where the game will be broadcast and choose the home radio broadcast. You'll be able to hear me and Earthquakes legend Joe Cannon on the call. And you can also go to the website for 810 KSFO here in the Bay Area, and you can stream the call there. And then if you want to follow me on socials, just search Ted Ramey, Ramey. Just look for the bald bearded guy smiling and holding a microphone. It's pretty easy to figure out which one is me. But yeah, I mean, we have a great time calling the Earthquakes games. This is year 13 for Joe Cannon and I together, and we have a great time during every broadcast. And I always tell people that, Major League Soccer is continuing to be an evolving and improving league. Each year gets that much more fun. And if people are curious after seeing that first win for San Jose in week number 1, or a very high-level performance from Atlanta in week number 1, then I think we're in for a really good matchup on Saturday afternoon when these two teams meet.
Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for the Oppo research. We will be reaching out all season long. Thanks for dropping by.
Anytime. Thank you.